I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Again, sorry for our delay. I'm sure you all had fun trying to find parking spaces outside. It's sports night. Did you all see the crazy kids? They're having so much fun. So Betty, let the record show that the board met in executive session, and that also I was not present for most of executive session. I was at sports night to consider discussions regarding proposed, pending, current litigation matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of particular person or persons, and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. So we'll move first to the approval of the minutes for the January 25th, 2018 and the February 8th, 2018 meetings. Could I have a motion? Motion. And a second? And I have a second. Any comments or questions?
Yes, I finally have the one sentence that we talked about 2 weeks ago. I didn't get to Betty in advance.
Okay.
We tabled the January 25th minutes.
Right, we did.
Right.
Okay, and you wanted to add another
And so Rich
sentence?
and I said we wanted to add something, but I think you did already.
Yeah.
He already got his is. Right.
Okay.
So mine was just going to be that I had noted the sample schedules didn't address that students in the arts or research, and that we had kids that were coming in at 7:20 in the morning and also not able to eat lunch when they did.
So you're going to give that statement to Betty, right?
I can give that.
Did
to
everyone
Betty.
hear that, trustees? Because we're going to vote on them as amended.
I had to go back and watch the video. It's at 9:10 on the video.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that from now on, that each board member, first of all, understand that the minutes are the general flavor of a meeting and discussion, not specific comments, and certainly not back and forths. And that if you would come to the meeting with your changes at that first meeting after, or get them to Betty even before, so that she can change them and distribute them to the board so that we all have a chance to fully read them.
Absolutely, because
Okay.
that was in response to the fact that we had public comment responding to comments that were not reflected otherwise in the minutes.
Okay.
That was the specific conversation we had. I thought it was an unusual situation.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
I did. It was interesting. We haven't really done this where we've been on the board and we'd had a couple revisions of the minutes. So what I like to do is go back if I can and watch the video. And like Sarah, I went back and watched the video, and I saw the comments that were added by certain trustees, and they were great comments. And I'm glad that we added them to the record. But there were also a lot of other comments that I thought were great that aren't part of the record. Mm-hmm. The record of a meeting that was 3 hours and 14 minutes long. Mm-hmm. And I went back to Robert's rules and just read what it said. In the meetings of ordinary societies and boards, the duty of the secretary is to mainly record what is done by the assembly and not what is said by the members of the assembly. Mm-hmm. So action items, votes, etc. So I don't need to go back and make sure that everything that was said was in there by me or by other people. Mm-hmm. But as a board member, I guess I'd like a little form or guidance of what we want to expect in minutes going forward. So it's not a complete play-by-play, because if someone wants to get the full play-by-play, those videos are up and running and we can all have them.
Excuse me, Tony, just before you answer, they can't hear you. I don't think your mic is on.
Oh, the button's on. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Turn it up.
Turn it up. How's that? Okay. Thank you. Okay, Dave, thank you very much. Betty has done a terrific job with the minutes for the years that I have been there and the years I sat in the audience. And so you're right, this has never come up before, and I think it's important that we continue to do them as they have been done in the past. So I encourage trustees, again, if you have changes that you would like to the minutes, if there are things that you would like to be added, it has to be agreed upon by all of us, and we really need to get these minutes up within the time period that
Within
we
2
have,
weeks. So
2
we
weeks.
discussed that our process when we had to further amend was that we would post with it marked
Right.
draft.
But I don't want to get into the business of doing that, so I would like us.
I think we've had extremely,
Right, so
Rarely.
just moving forward, let's try to keep this process, get it back to where it was. So,
And just to reiterate, I think Betty does a really good job of capturing what what's going on. Like, I read them and I said, oh yeah, it covers it all, and although there's a lot of details that aren't in there, that's not what the minutes are for, but it's a very good job every week. Thank you.
absolutely.
okay. So all in favor of the approval of the minutes, January 25th as amended by Sarah's statement, and then the February 8th? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
I do have one
Sarah?
question. The treasurer's report, on the first page of the treasurer's report on the income during the month of December indicated a American Water refund.
Wait, I'm going to fall off my chair. I didn't see that.
That's literally what it said.
Olivia, you got it there?
I know you all read the treasurer's report.
We
but
did.
As carefully as you did, Sarah, I doubt it.
Some of the American Water customers have been getting what's called a refund of your tax. There was a letter that came out from American Water to all.
This was, but
to all
that's
the-
not what it was. This was
This
money
is a refund
deposited
on-
in a bank account.
This was
It said
3,200.
American Water, Carpenter Avenue.
Correct. So we'll get you the details on that money coming in.
Okay,
Thank you.
that'd be great.
Page 1.
At the top.
Second line from the reimbursements of the receipts, Olivia.
3246 and 96 cents.
I'll check into the detail and I'll send it to you.
Okay,
And I have a question too.
yes.
My own. So just, I know we talked about community education and we did that. So there was an 11,000 revenue from that, but no, it's a zero sustaining program. So just different times it comes and goes, but at the end there's a line where it's all zeroed out and those community educators get that back? Or how does that work?
I can't say that it zeroes out completely because it depends on the programs that we run.
Okay,
It's usually not zeroed out.
okay. But it hovers around zero?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, let's move on to the report of the superintendent.
Okay. So I just want to begin by welcoming everybody back from midwinter break. So welcome back. For those of you watching the news and the media and reading the paper, you know that these have been like super complicated weeks for all of us as our nation deals with issues of gun control and gun rights and student safety and how all these pieces come together. And so, as you can see from the debate, there are no easy answers to them, but we've got a lot of people around us, and we're talking about how to move that along. So, I'll talk more about our safety efforts in a little bit, but we will have a very extensive discussion tonight regarding the instructional component of the budget, and so I'll keep my remarks generally brief and mostly related to our efforts in safety and security. So, I also do want to thank our administrators for being here tonight. Many of them are here. They've built this budget from zero, and this is kind of the exciting night about the budget process, if there is an exciting night about the budget process, because this is about the instructional program. This is our bread and butter. This is why we exist, and so we get to talk about the things that really drive our mission forward tonight, and you get to see what the big parts of funding that happen. So we'll talk about that. I do want to reinforce to everybody that the safety of our students and our staff is the single most important thing that we are tasked with as educators. It is an enormous responsibility. We take it incredibly seriously. That said, our processes are absolutely in motion, and we're making significant progress in those efforts over the past couple of weeks. My approach to this process, just so the board is and the community is aware, is to expand this discussion beyond just brick and mortar and weapons, but to really think about this in terms of safe spaces for our students, And we'll use this as an opportunity to look at our schools as safe spaces through multiple lenses, including issues of race and gender and sexuality and substance use and just overall wellness. And in addition to that, all of the locked doors and windows and screens and all that stuff. So it all comes together in a more cohesive plan, and I'll talk with you about that in a couple of minutes. So what has happened since we have been back actually on Monday? Each principal has reviewed their drop-off and dismissal procedures to ensure limited access to the buildings that are and each of those access points are supervised and appropriately staffed. On Monday, each principal held a faculty meeting with Monday afternoon, mandatory faculty meeting where all of our emergency protocols were reviewed. We used it as an opportunity to check on the wellness of our staff, to make sure that they were feeling okay about what was happening and equipped. And we set in motion a series of action steps aimed at improving our practices, and that will vary by building based on what the building needs. And then professional development remains ongoing at each of the different schools based on the identified needs that are there. Before the break, I had met with Olivia Boazzi and John Hall, and they are structuring a process to assess our facilities and the deployment of our security staff. And simultaneously, Linda Binion is structuring a process. She's our Director of Guidance, for those of you who don't know, structuring a process that will focus on instruction, crisis management, and mental health. This week I met with the county superintendents twice. We've been sharing ideas about what others are doing, how others are handling this. One of those meetings was with the commissioner of, the police commissioner of Nassau County. On Tuesday or Wednesday, along with the principals, we met with our 2 POP officers to review our processes. We mapped out a series of steps that we were going to do in the short term, mapped out an national action plan, and we're in the process of scheduling additional follow-up meetings. You'll recall in the email that I sent to the community on Sunday evening that I was looking to engage in a comprehensive safety and security audit of the district. Since that time, we've received 4 proposals. We have screened those proposals. We've narrowed the field to a smaller number of proposals, and we're in the process of checking references as of today. And so what I'd like to do is let the reference process ensue, and in the meantime, I will bring back to the board on the 15th my recommendation for a resolution to move this work along. It's hard to say what the exact cost of it will be because there's an initial screening part of the process, and then there are different things that you can add on to your process. So reviewing not just your exterior, but also your interior, and reviewing your emergency procedures. So we'll take a look at all of that, and I'll be prepared to bring that recommendation by resolution to the board on the 15th. Okay. We will also be engaging with the Department of Homeland Security through Nassau County to also provide us with an assessment as well. So we'll have 2 processes happening simultaneously, but I do feel that it is important not to wait, let a lot of time pass before we get consultants in the buildings and looking at what we're doing. Okay. Since my arrival, I have noted that how essential it is to have district-wide communication via radio, and that is not something that we currently have a structure for. And so to that end, I had asked the facility staff to, John and Olivia, to develop a proposal and of what that would look like and what it would cost, and that will address infrastructure needs because there are what are called repeaters that get placed at the highest points within the community, and that allows the communication to move from anywhere within the district. So the cost of that is ongoing, but we can handle this through budget transfers and some reimbursement costs. And so I would like to bring that forward at the next meeting as well. Are there, we can talk later if there are objections to that. Okay. Next up, moving on in this process, we are looking to convene a safety and security task force that will involve a whole wide range of stakeholders, teachers, parents, students, community members. So please be on the lookout for more information on how you can get involved there. And then also, so it's been a busy 3.5 days, right? We've also done some research. So, you know, when you go into a hospital or you go into the building in New York City or anywhere, there's some kind of visitor management system where you give your ID and they put you in and they make sure that you are cleared and they give you a sticker and on you go. We don't have a visitor management system in North Shore, and so we've collected proposals so that we may have a visitor management system in North Shore, so we'll be reviewing that. We also are reviewing technology that exists through, you may have seen it on the news, there was just an article in the paper about an app called Rave, R-A-V-E, and it syncs with the Nassau County Police, and we can have this right on our phones, and we're able to communicate with each other and with our first responders if we need to using this app. It's actually free. And we are also researching ways, there are technologies that exist for, you know, so when we say if you see something, say something, right? So we are researching ways that if you see something, you can say something, and you can do that discreetly and confidentially and anonymously. And so we're researching that as well. I'm almost there, I'm sorry. I'll be working with Albert Cousins and Rob Dennis and subsequently their students through the national walkouts that are scheduled for March 14th and April 20th. Believe it or not, it's a really complex issue. And I want to work with the teachers and the students who want to engage in this process. However, we have to assess how best to respect the voices of the people who wish to do this with ensuring their safety and making sure that it complies with the law. So that is not so easy to accomplish. And we are going to be talking and working that through over the next few days. The 14th is related to the Parkland, Florida shooting, and April 20th is the 19th anniversary of the Columbine shooting. So there are two things happening. It's hard to imagine that was 19 years ago, but it was. So we'll be working that out. So depending on how the board wishes to proceed, I could either take your questions now or later, and then we could work through the budget discussions, and that's what I've got. So thank you.
So, because I think that's going to turn into a very big discussion, I would like to hold it until we get through
No problem.
the agenda items, the budget review. Okay. Okay, so we don't have the, thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much, and thank you to your staff and everyone who worked so hard this week and always.
They've done a lot of work in a very compressed period of time. I really appreciate it.
We don't have a report from the SGO because they are having fun at sports night. And I'm happy to be with you all, but I wish I was at sports night too. So let's move to the agenda, to the budget
Okay.
review.
So we have, tonight is the night, it's a song, right? Tonight is the night or something? Okay. So tonight is the night that we will look at all of our instructional items. I feel like I'm going to have a problem here. There we go. Okay. So we have the instructional program, we have technology, community services. We will look at tonight the athletics and co-curricular programs, special education guidance, and the revenue projections, as we talked about at the last meeting. I will go through that with the board. So we will start in section C3. Actually, that's the narrative part. so we won't,
Go to,
so go, page, thank you, page 19. Okay, and the way, what we will do, I'm like a little awkward here tonight. So what we will do is I will give you, as we did the last time, I think what worked was I gave you a general overview of what was in that section. We looked at the lines, and then if the board had any questions, we are here to make sure that we answer them for you. Okay? So, actually it's page 14.
14, but not of the narrative section, or of the narrative section? D14.
D14.
You're saying we're starting with supervision of instruction?
D19, regular instruction. Under the regular instruction tab, the first page of regular instruction.
It's 19.
It's 19. Yeah. I have 19.
Yeah, I have 19, I have 14 also.
Oh, you have 14?
14 is you
Is
started in
supervision.
2010, 14 stuff. So 2010, the budget line.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot of review.
So we have not reviewed the 2010 lines yet
Oh.
in the budget.
I see where you are.
And so in order to remain moving sequentially, we stopped at page 13 the last time.
Okay.
And
We are
so
at 14.
we're at 14.
Okay.
And then you're right, 19 is where we get into some
Sure.
other things, but
Okay.
it actually begins on 14.
On 14.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, so the 2010 lines are the lines that emanate out of Rob Klebicki's office, and so what you will see on these lines are Rob's salary, the salaries for his support staff, and then there are a series of expenses around professional development. And so those are all listed out there, Math in Focus, and communicative classrooms and can-do statements through the ELL program. It's where we fund our employee assistance program. It's where some TC work gets funded out of. It's where we fund Tri-States out of. And then to offset this money, there is money in what are called the Title I and 2A grants that Rob administers through his office. And so that is what we have there. We did decrease this line, but we still feel that we are resourced to do our work. Are there any questions? Sarah.
So, curriculum instruction and other expenses, where we have the decrease at the 100,000, that's driven by the grant offset, yes? Like, that's how the math
Partially.
works on that. Partially, right, the grant offset is 75. So I did, and we have a few places where we have grant offsets marked on the expense side of the budget. So that means the grants that are part of the expense side of the budget are not on the revenue side?
Grants are.
Yeah, not.
And and is that true of every grant or some grants?
Most of the grants, yes.
Most of.
These are the, federal grants that we receive.
Okay, because on the revenue side, when we have things like miscellaneous receipts, I can't tell, right, if
That's-
there's some grant thing or if we put all the grants
No,
on the expense
The
side.
miscellaneous receipts do not include grant money. It includes reimbursements, discounts, any BOCES surpluses that we receive. It is explained I went through, if you look at the 5-year
I believe, no.
revenue projection, it's included there, all the details of most of what the miscellaneous revenues are.
Okay,
It varies from year to year also. It all depends.
absolutely. I mean, in some sense, it's putting the grant money as sort of a negative on the expense side makes reading the expenses much more clear in a lot of ways. You know, right, what we're spending because we can get the money from someplace else, but
It also depends on how the auditors want us to put it. In some cases, they want us to record it as revenue, and they want us to show it in the revenue side of the budget. That's why we do it that way.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes? Okay, so you'll see the, on that page, the reduction is 81,046 for that line. Moving on to the 2020 lines, that's page 15. So these are all, the 2020 lines are the salaries for our administrators and their support staff. So those are your principals, and assistant principals and directors. Most of that is, all of that is contractually driven. And there is you'll see overtime costs built into there for some of the main offices and whatnot. Okay, and that will take you through, the salary piece takes you through the top of page 16. And then as you move down the page on 16, 20, 2400, 10 through 20, 494, these are supplies and materials related to the principal's office, so professional conferences for each principal, and some printing costs for parent education. And then you'll see postage costs in there and graduation costs in there. And each of the administrators have $250 of monies that they get to spend generally in one place. And it's an equitable way for them to have a little discretionary expense money. Okay? And that will take you all the way through 17. It's all the petty cash, postage, and supplies. And you'll see the numbers that are on these lines tie directly back into the narratives that were written by each of the administrators. Okay? And then as you so are there any questions through page 18?
Anyone? No? Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so the next line of the general instructional budget are the 2110 lines. Those begin on page 19. They go through (2110s) go all the way through page 26. And so let me tell you what's in here. You'll see some numbers that are fairly large. Those are the salary codes that are broken out by building. So you will see, and this is calculated to the person. So when Olivia and I are building this section of the budget, we actually sit with the staffing numbers and we build this based on real salaries. So you have your Glen Head teachers, followed by the Glenwood Landing teachers, followed by Seacliff teachers, followed by our district-wide teachers. Hello? Followed by middle school, followed by high school, and then you'll see a line for home teaching, and that relates to students who are hospitalized or placed at home for any reason, and that allows us to teach them at home. There's you'll see the next line is another big number for professional development on this line, another $200,000. So that's not the only place where we talked about before where there is professional development money. And our substitute teachers are on these lines. We have a textbook clerk. All of our monitors are on these lines. Aides are on these lines. So you'll see that how granular this gets. Like at 2110 443 are sewing machine repairs. So we actually estimate what we will spend in repairing sewing machines. Are there any questions through through these lines?
Just that some of us own a sewing factory and we wouldn't want to poo-poo sewing machines.
Oh, I'm not poo-pooing sewing machines. Oh, no, not at all.
Those things break.
I
They
think
do
we-
break.
Often.
No.
And your narrative keeps us in stitches.
Oh, boy.
Oh, wow.
And it's not even 9 yet.
I did have a question, though.
Yeah.
So, Rob, in your narrative, you talked a lot about professional development. This line here, 2110, 130, 90, 2134, has gone down. I realize that's only part of the professional development throughout the budget, as it's interspersed in different areas. But your narrative really keyed in on the importance of that, which of course we all know. So you're comfortable at this reduction? I'm putting you in the spot, sorry, but
You're not putting me on the spot, but if I'm hearing you'd like to give us more, that would be wonderful. No,
well,
I'm
I
teasing.
think that professional
I'm teasing.
development district-wide to make our teachers more effective is not money poorly spent.
Yeah, let me explain this line a little bit further. The money in this line goes to pay teachers outside of the contract agreements. In other words, this does not pay their salaries. It does not pay for any advisorships or sports stipends for coaches or anything like that. It's anything that's done outside of the workday for which teachers would get paid. So predominantly it's two things. Number one, it's money to support curriculum work, because that's done outside the school day. The other thing it's money to pay for teachers to attend professional development. If they come in during the summer to attend professional development, it pays for their time for coming in. As you mentioned, that line has gone down over the years, but I will say that, we are all sensitive to the fact that, the community faces pressures, and we all have to kind of tighten our belts to do what we need to do, and we do it happily and we make it work. As a matter of fact, we just had a meeting today, myself and all the directors and some of the principals, looking at all the proposals, just to give you a scope of the proposals that are sent in. I collect those proposals in October. I ask for requests for curriculum development work that needs to be done. I ask for requests for professional development that's being asked for or required. And the sum total of all those proposals came out to $500,000. So we sit down and we say, okay, let's look at this together as a team. What could be postponed to another year? What could we kind of break down from the initial proposal to cut it down back to a lower cost, and so we always work it out. Some people say, hey, I don't need to do this necessarily this year, so I'll give up this money and do it next year, but then that means I would want to make sure that I have that money coming to do this work for next year. So people really do work it out. It's a process, and I think it's funding that we definitely can live with.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks for asking.
Could I just follow up on that point?
I will too, but go ahead.
I think you have to focus on the fact that we had very high professional development costs in the beginning with Columbia's Teachers College, and now you're on more of an upkeep. We had very high professional development cost with implementing IB. We had high professional development cost with changing the math due to the implementation of the core curriculum. If you remember, we went from everyday math to math and focus and go math, and we had two maths at the same time to ease the transition. So you had to train all your teachers K through 6 in math all over again on a new curriculum. So I think that maybe the need right now is not as strong as the need was 3, 4, 5 years ago, depending on the curriculum changes.
Definitely not in those areas, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of things that just want to be clear about the scope of the change we're talking about. We're talking about cutting, this line is literally half of what we spent in 16-17, where we spent $393,000 and now it's down to $200,000. And the $393,000 was not out of line with the 5-year actuals that we have going back. 15-16 was $327,000. So it's a significant cut. And especially in light of the proposals where you're saying, there's certainly places where you could spend even more, it concerns me. I think a lot of us do feel that the professional development piece is important. This is a particular kind of it. Even if they're spending elsewhere, this piece is important. And we're always going to have professional changes, changes in,
Changes in
you know,
law.
the new science standards that we're dealing with.
Right.
There are changes to the ELA learning standards that we're dealing with. This budget clearly provides with new math textbooks. I think it was 7th and 8th grade, this Envision series, like that's different. I don't think that's going to go away. I'm not saying there wouldn't be any swings in the amount of professional development you need, but it does strike me as a big cut in a place that where investment really pays off over a long period of time.
Right.
Certainly as a percentage of what we spend on our teachers and our faculty, it's not a, $200,000.
I
It's
agree.
not a huge number, and we,
Millions in salaries, right?
and the one thing we didn't mention is there's always new teachers as well who haven't had the benefit of that
Right.
in the past.
Well, that's something that's ongoing too. So though there was initial cost in training the faculty that was here at the time, the faculty's, there's always some kind of a
cycling.
turnover. And we're phasing in programs. Like, for example, with our math program, this year was, we're up to 6th grade phasing in that program. So that cost won't go away for a while. And in terms, like Marianne said, the cost for our Teachers College has gone down from what it was initially when we started training. But there are certain costs that will remain stable within that area, but certainly those have gone down. But like Sarah said too, those costs are replaced with other costs. The state just came out passing the state standards for the arts. So that's something that Dahlia wants to make sure that she has professional development for the teachers in the arts program. We talked about the standards in social studies. I think it was at the beginning of this year, end of last year.
Yeah, the state's changing
Next generation science standards, which are the New York State science learning standards. So we always have a need for that professional development. And of course, as the changes come from the state, sometimes that need is higher than other times. And for example, last summer we ran 4 workshops with supplying teachers and giving them information about alcohol and drugs, something that was really important to us. And so that was a brunt of the cost last year. So there's always something to fill that space.
That's fine. I'm just saying, just in summary, you want to talk about sewing machine repair? I'm your guy. You want to talk about where that professional development money should go? That's not what I'm here to do, but I am here to say that I might be a little more comfortable at a slightly higher number at this particular line.
And I mean, it can be a line that, depending on the consensus of the board, if we want them to take another look at, we still have weeks to go. But that's,
I'm okay with
depends
the
on how
number.
everybody feels.
So let's continue on, but keep that as a note of something to return to.
Well,
Just a note.
So at the end of, before we leave tonight, what would be helpful to know is if the board wants us to relook at that, then we will do that, and we can bring back, sure.
I think the question is, we're guided by you on the budget. If you're comfortable with what you've recommended, I, for one, would not see a need to look at it at this point in time. So if you feel that it's not properly funded, that's a different issue. But there are a lot of individual items here. For us to second guess an individual item without having the full context that you have, I'm not comfortable with that. If you say to us this deserves a second look on our part, we will then ask you to give us your recommendation as to what should happen.
Okay. I wouldn't bring you what I wasn't comfortable with, but what I will do is I will have a conversation with Rob. We'll look at the proposals that did not make it in, and if there's anything in there that I feel strongly about, we will we'll revisit that and bring that as a revised line. Does that work?
That's perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a different kind of concern on this page, but if somebody else.
Where are we staying? We're staying on the same on 19?
I'm still on 19.
On 9. All right. What is your different kind of concern?
And this is kind of an example, because there are a few places where we have this. If we look at like the substitute teacher lines, middle school and the high school, those lines are at 110,000. We have spent more on substitutes in those schools every single year since 13, 14, maybe longer. That's the amount of data that I have. So I think there's some places, like with substitutes, and looking back at custodial overtime once we got the 5-year actuals, where I'm concerned that if we can't point to some structural change we made, that we might be having
Under.
some wishful thinking, right? We don't hire substitutes because we want to, right? You
Right.
bring in a substitute when you need a substitute.
Right.
And the 5-year actuals on the substitutes, on custodial overtime, and in a few other places that are going to come up. I think there's some supply figures that are like that, which you could have a little bit more control over. But there is space between where we are and the tax cap, and I don't want to end up with
To
a
miss that.
budget where we end up where you've got overtime and substitute issues, and you're having to take it from someplace you don't want to take it from.
So this is a perfect place where we can use what Herman's model was suggesting, that, and depending on Peter's comfort level, if you want to go back and look at this is something that we can look at. You can look at, not us. You look at it first and then make
still
a
the board's budget,
recommendation. Exactly.
Okay.
But if I could just add also, one of the things we discussed, we set our goals for the year. One of the things that didn't make the cut this year, we had a lot of goals. One of the things I hear a lot in the community, I still would like us to look at, is the amount of time that our students are in their classrooms without their primary teacher. And I think that's a larger study that isn't necessarily budget related. But I think this highlights, again, that might be something that I will be bringing up again, as we said, 2018, 2019.
I just,
Give us a context in terms of other districts. Is the level of substitute teaching within a normal range? Is ours high? Is it low? Because just having a number doesn't tell us anything. And I don't know if it's high. It could actually be low compared to other districts. I think we may need some education there.
and, I just want to note that when you have teachers being trained in Houston and Florida and Toms River, and when you have for IB, and when you have them being pulled out of the classrooms for training in math and SVOs, that puts in substitute teachers. So I think you're going to have to look at the substitute teachers in context as to what was going on in the district at the time. They may have, the substitutes may have been necessitated by the implementation of these programs. So I just don't want to look at it in a vacuum as a substitute teacher. And the substitute teacher obviously does, I assume the substitute teacher doesn't include leave replacements?
No,
Right.
those are
Okay.
just per diem
So,
subs.
okay, these are just the per diems. That's what I assume by the number.
That's correct.
Okay, so I think you really have to look at that in context.
All right, let's
Okay,
move on. Okay?
anything else?
Not on 19. Where are we going next?
Okay. So that takes us through 26, all of the general instruction on your textbooks.
I can go to 21 then.
Okay.
Okay.
So here on 21, when you look at the elementary schools, the state mandated expenses near the bottom of the page, those, right, 16, 17 were $9,000, $10,000 a school, right? And this is where, and I'm wondering if maybe money has just moved. This is where we say we give state mandated tests, the ALA and the math test, and those have to be graded, and we have to deal with these in various ways. And at 16, 17, this costs us $10,000 a school, and now it only costs us $1,000. Are we doing something different, or is the money someplace else? What's happening here?
I have to go back and look at this. So we send our tests out for scoring. No, we don't? We score them in-house?
Sometimes we bring in
I believe sometimes for the ELA and the math, we bring in retired teachers, or sometimes teachers on leave, right?
So I have to go back into the budget detail on this. I will get back to you.
Okay, fair
you.
enough.
More than
Yes,
fair.
sir.
Also in terms of a process, as people go through the material, and these are very good questions, and these questions arise, if these questions can be directed to Peter in advance, it gives him an opportunity to respond.
Right.
Because if you just ask a question like that on a budget this complex, in the moment, he may not have an answer, but given some advance notice, I think this would be more productive.
Absolutely. I can't disagree. And I just want to remind trustees that when you do that, you still, even once you have the answer, have to ask that question again in public.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
And that would be enormously helpful.
okay. Terrific. So let's move to, we finished 26, and then we're going to move on to, I'm not going to take this over. Please see where we're going next.
Okay. So we move on to the special ed component
Okay,
of the
thank
budget.
you.
Peter, I just want to make a very quick summary comment
Yes,
in the last
please.
section. So, again, that instruction, and I think this speaks to what you said, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. That's up like 4.1 or 2%, and yet we've managed to have a budget that's only increased by the, I think that's
Exactly.
Very good
That's
point.
an impressive move.
Yeah, thank you. Pardon me?
Hey, no, she's making a joke.
So remember when I talked to you about the last time, right? So the 8 major lines driving the budget are account to $3.3 million, and the actual increase that I'm proposing to the board at this point is like around $2.7 million. So, okay. So the special ed component of the budget is a really important part of the budget. It serves 400 plus children in the district with a range of needs, all of them important. And so when you look at the bottom line of what it costs us to run special education in the North Shore schools, that is, it's almost $11.5 million for us to run our special ed program. So it is a real sizable component of the budget. What I wanted to do is go through, we can start on page 27. Chris Marino is here. I want to say just very publicly, thank him for the really good work he's done. He has looked at this budget line by line by line by line. He's a brand new director. And he's come up with some really fresh and creative ideas for how we can service kids better. So, so thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for being here tonight. So, these the 2250 lines are the special education lines. They include more staff development. This is staff development for the special education staff. Okay. Home teaching for special ed children. They're the salaries of special ed teachers. Now, so remember when you see that grant offset of $180,000, that relates back to what are called the 611 grants. That's money that comes in from the state. It has to be used for students with disabilities, and so part of that money is used to offset salaries. There are all of our teaching assistants in this. We have 19 teaching assistants in the special education program. Teacher aides, one-to-one, shared aides. You'll see that there's a reduction there. The reduction there is based on student need, and an approach of if there are shared aides, that they are shared, and so we will be looking at student placement there. So as you move down these lines, you'll see that there's monies for district-wide equipment in special education, money for psychiatric evaluations when children need them, occupational and physical education, physical therapy. Thank you, Rob. That's $180,000. You'll see a decrease in special ed miscellaneous therapy of $180,000, and that relates to the behavioral consultants that we talked about. So
Right.
there are currently 4.5 behavioral therapists in the district, and the recommendation in next year's budget is that for that to be 3. So we will, I met with Joe and Francine and Chris yesterday. We talked about how they might or might not be deployed. We looked at the children who have this as a recommendation on their IEP. We assured ourselves and each other that whatever the recommendations were on the IEPs, the kids would absolutely get what they need, that the building would still have the ability to have consults, and if there comes a time when we have to think about this, because these are hourly people, that we have flexibility within the program and the budget to always increase those hours as needed, but they should be more fluid. So that's what that is about. And then as you go through some of these other lines, you'll see consults for psychiatrics and postage and IEP Direct, that 22,593. That's a hard number. That's the IEP Direct system. We have funding for impartial hearings in here. The number at the bottom where you see 225419, that's special ed 20% maintenance. That's the money that we have to pay related to students who are in residential placements through the state. The reason why that number is down is because there are fewer children next year in residential placements because of graduation or aging out or whatever. It's not a program reduction. Okay. And then you'll, if you look at page 28, you will see the monies that we pay to for special ed in private schools, for special ed and BOCES programs, for all the supplies, students we send to other public schools. There are 2, so all of that is done student by student with real cost. And then if you go to the last page of this, you'll see all of the BOCES placements. And so one of the confounding things about BOCES, right, so we talked about BOCES at the last meeting. What is it? How does it help us? It's a shared service. We get aid back on the placements that we make at BOCES, but you will see that some of these placements can be very, very costly. And sometimes it is not the best. So when the CSE makes their recommendations, they are looking at the whole range of programming, and so you'll see sometimes it is actually less expensive to do a private placement versus or a residential placement versus a BOCES placement. But so those are not costs that we control. The difference with the BOCES placement is that we do get aid back on those in the ensuing years. So that is the special budget. You'll see that budget is down by almost $200,000 next year from this year. And I would say to you, I feel very confident that that every single student who is classified is, we've looked at all of their unique needs, and they will absolutely be serviced appropriately.
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions about special ed for?
Anyone?
I can ask something.
Sure.
So I appreciate how incredibly difficult this part of the budget is, where, I mean, some parts of it, you know the cost of a student, but you have a student or 2 move in or out of the district, and you can get big swings in the numbers.
Yes.
And then the other side of it that makes it tricky is some things are incredibly hard to predict. They do really swing. Like, we don't know how many impartial hearings we're going to have. So it's one of those things. So I, look at the trends from the 5 years, and there are numbers here that feel much lower than where we've been historically over the past 5 years. Although you addressed one of them, thank you, the miscellaneous therapy, right? There's clearly reason for that. That's moved. The ones to me that look low historically are like the special ed home teaching, which maybe we can predict, but maybe no. That seems like
That's hard to predict. That is a hard one
right.
to predict. Yes.
Special ed teaching assistants is low historically, teacher aides, and impartial hearings feel out of line with where we've been historically. So again, it's my concern about
Not being at the limit.
that we're erring too far on the hoping everything's gonna work out for us.
So to answer your question, the teaching assistant number is based on the recommended teaching assistants that we have within the program, so that's a real number. The home teaching can be variable, right? So there could be years where it can be all over the place. It's very, very hard to predict.
Impartial hearings also, I would assume.
Impartial hearings are also invariable. We also have safety positions built into the budget. So in the event that a student moves into the district, we have contingency money available to fund that placement. So it should be okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you for this detail. It helps us to understand just how special education fits in the budget, what a very large and important part of the budget that it is. And thank you, Chris, also. And to our new staff, this is, we have a whole new team. And so I share Sarah's concern, but I also know this is a fresh set of people looking at this. So, and it's very clear that the per student cost for special education is very different than the per student cost for general education. And we've had in previous meetings that come up. But
And even within.
even
the
within,
category of- right, it's
terrifically
gonna-
different, even within these specific students that we're looking at here. Because does the public get this?
This is all on the web.
Okay, so the
doesn't have
specific
names.
students, there's no names.
just
They're
students
student 1
1
through 20, but it is very specific on the extent of the difference between a general ed per student cost and a potentially even what a special ed per student
Right,
cost
and I
is.
think we just want to be clear, our commitment is the same.
Yes.
Exactly,
And we want to be
exactly.
certain we budgeted well in this
Exactly,
category.
because we do spend a tremendous amount of time talking about general education students and not a tremendous amount of time talking about special education.
And so the costs are clearly higher, right? Because they have special needs,
Of course.
right? So you would expect to spend
Sure.
more funding per pupil on special needs kids.
Okay.
But it's money very well spent. And then we are always looking at ways in which that we can. It's important to me, and I know it's important to the new leadership, that to the extent that we can look at groups of children and have them be educated back in their home school, we would like to be able to do more of that rather than send them out. So we are
Which
looking
is
at
good for
which is
everyone.
good for everybody.
everyone.
And it's also more cost efficient.
Yes.
Right, and good for everybody, that
Yep.
families, kids.
And so to the extent that you can go to
Communities.
school
Right.
with your next door neighbor is a good thing.
Yes, and it's good for the kids in school, for all the kids.
And that was something
All
I
of
did want to point out on the 2 students that you were sending to other districts. It's because we don't have the specific program that meets their needs here.
That's actually a really important point to make, right? So when you see students who are recommended for out-of-district placements, whether that be at BOCES or in a private school or a residential school or in another public school, it is simply because we don't have a program to match their needs. So what the CSC then does is goes out and sends packets out to try to find programs that will match their needs.
Okay,
Okay.
great. All right, let's move to...
So thank you very much. If you look at page 30, this is the St. Christopher's tuition, so we have to budget for 3 of them. Or we have 3 of them. We have to, the agreement is that we can fund up to 6. And so what we know, we have 3 for next year, and the costs of that are what they are. We do get this money back in revenue, so exactly. So, but we have to budget it as an expense.
It is what it is.
We do calculate it in the 5-year revenue projections, so that is a part of the
Okay.
thinking. And then we're really cruising through here.
Are we?
Yes.
Good. What's next?
So so that's special education. All right, so continuing with special ed, on page 31
Okay.
is the,
Leadership?
nope,
No? What is it? Oh, the
occupational
supplies, community.
education.
Okay, got it.
Special ed summer supplies, special ed summer BOCES programs, and then it goes into continuing ed salaries and expenses, right? So that is occupational and continuing education.
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions?
Anyone? All right,
Okay,
let's move on to,
2335.
what's next?
Let me just,
I'm not sure we covered library for this one, did we?
so library is part of the instructional.
Okay, yeah, okay. Oh,
That's
yeah,
in
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm accustomed to my board saying cut, cut, cut. This is this is a new dynamic.
This is a new district for you.
I'm going to send them a little YouTube of this. Okay. So the 2810 180 through 2610 490. This includes the library and the AV program. So what you see on page 32 are the clerical support for the libraries at all of the schools, computer AV equipment, and then you'll see as you go down the page library books. And so that is that is a number that you see in most cases has increased. And I think it's important to put books in children's hands and fund the libraries. So so that's all there. And then it goes through AV supplies for all the different buildings, and we have detail on that if you would like it, and software services for district-wide in the library. So that will take you through page 33, and you'll see that the decrease on that is $4,445.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yep. Technology.
Okay, technology is our 2630 codes. And so when you look at, again, this is a component of the budget which is comprises a lot of dollars. It is almost a $2 million component of the budget. It is increasing by $135,000 for next year. And so this is all of the wiring and the equipment and the iPad replacements and the implementation of the Chromebooks in grades 9 and 6 for next year. So there will be 3 grades of Chromebooks, so 5, 6, and 9.
5, 6, and 9.
Right,
Okay.
and then so what we will seek to do is build 2 grade levels in per year, and over the course of a few years we will move to Chromebooks. Now, just so the board is aware, there is still money for iPads in an iPad replacement, just because the high school is moving towards an alternate platform in the Google Classroom, and Chromebooks does not make the iPads obsolete. They will still be used. They may be used in different ways, and then in a lot of instances we would like to repurpose them down in some of the primary grades and elementary schools where they have a little bit more practical application. Okay, so so I don't want anybody to feel like the iPad work that you've done over time has been for naught, because it hasn't been.
Okay.
Right, it's just as the technology evolves, it's a different platform. Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
Technology as it relates to storing of confidential information on students, student records, all of that. Do we have, and where do we have the kind of cyber security protection that records now need? Are we on a regular basis bringing in an outfit that will determine how easy it is to hack into our systems? We have a lot of confidential information on kids. I'm really concerned that that information remain confidential. I'd like to see where in the budget we address that, and ultimately whether you think we address that well enough.
And that's certainly something
I don't-
that I
yeah.
think would require, you may not have an answer for
Well,
this
I thought there
evening.
was some very good stuff in the narrative about it, that we were going to be updating the firewalls, was a big piece of
Right.
it, that we
Yes.
had the software, the penetration checks, which he refers to.
It's
Yes.
all
And
in
that we're
his narrative.
contracting through BOCES on the student privacy, which I was really glad to see,
It's all in
too.
his narrative.
And while I'm talking about the narrative, I just really enjoyed the whole multi-year plan on keeping the whole infrastructure up to date and laying out which parts of it we were going to do when. I thought that was terrific.
Yeah, and the
Thank you.
phase-in of the technology as we creep from, eye to non-eye.
Mary Ann, you had a comment.
Yes, I just wanted you, for the benefit of the public, to just speak briefly about the Smart Bond, and also, since security and safety is paramount in everyone's mind, about our bow tie network and how we're tied in on security to the Nassau County Police and to and BOCES.
definitely.
through BOCES.
Okay, so I don't have the.
Just a
the-
little, sort of like
I
brief
can give you like
overview.
30,000 view of some of that, right? So the, I gotta take these in order now. So the Smart Bond Act, what is our Smart Bond allocation?
About
Olivia?
408,000 or 400.
Right, so about around $400,000 was the district was allocated in Smart Bond money. That was money that was approved through the governor's, one of the governor's proposals a year or two ago. I think it was 2 years ago.
He borrowed about $2 billion
Right.
from the state and distributed it.
And so what districts have to then do is put together a plan for how that money is going to be spent. And so we are using that for infrastructure and for safety and security largely. And so I think that was a wise way to use that money, because if you use that money on devices, then at some point in time you have to replace those devices. Whereas if you use it for infrastructure and hardware, then those things tend to last a much longer time, and you don't build another recurring expense within the budget. So I think that was really smart of the board to do it that way, and I'm glad. In addition to that, the BOCE, this part of the budget, we are tied into BOCES through Intralogic, and they can monitor our security systems and our cameras, and we have the ability to lock our doors from an external place. So this is all in that, and then part of what is happening in the future is a plan to rewire and cable the various schools to keep up with the technology as it grows, and we stay faster than, you know, our infrastructure allows us to remain faster than what the devices require us to have. And so as far as the safety, the firewalls and all that stuff, that is, we can look at all that. That's all very sort of finely articulated in the narrative, but everything is very much locked down from the network and very hard to penetrate. So not impossible, obviously, but certainly difficult. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's
But
move
certainly, we can definitely have and I think it's a worthy discussion for how that all plays itself out at some point.
on. I think we should wrap it into the continued discussion on
Sure,
security.
absolutely. That's actually a fine way to do it. Okay. Moving on.
Yes, please.
Okay. Page 37.
I'm sorry, I thought we were past
Oh,
30.
sorry.
Sorry, 35. Just want to discuss this in the context of the zero-based budgeting.
Yes.
Whereas these numbers are the same across all the schools, the same as last year. Is this numbers where they float around that, so we're comfortable with these numbers, knowing you're not going to know how much toner there's going to be, but generally this works? Because this is too coincidental to be the same exact number.
Yes,
It's actually by
these are
design.
the
Go ahead.
supplies, so toner, that kind of thing, and it's very, very difficult. He has a ballpark figure, and he maintains those ballpark figure from year to year. Sometimes we have to do budget transfers.
But generally
Stay within it.
it's been
You
holding.
can see that it's right within the range of the expenditure.
Okay.
And so there's a certain number of projectors that are in there, and that's a real number. So he has the projectors on a replacement cycle, and you'll see there are 20 bulbs for a smart board. So that's battery replacements. He actually gets fairly granular with that.
So he evens out his expenses,
Absolutely.
knowing
That some bulbs
few
could go
years
and you
into
don't know
that.
which ones
Yeah.
are.
Right, exactly. And then that's equitable across the schools.
All right.
And it's well planned that we're
Yeah.
replacing stuff as it ages. He addresses that too, and the computers have a lifespan about 5 years, and we're being consistent so that you don't get the bubble.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
So now we were moving to guidance.
Okay. Okay, so the guidance, guidance begins on page 37, and so if you look at page 37, 2805, 160, that's the attendance office. Those are clerical supports, 1.5. and residency searches are below that, and then attendance supplies. So the total of those salaries and that is $107,000. And then if you go to the next page, on page 38, we have 3 full-time guidance counselors at the middle school, 5 full-time counselors at the high school. There is monies in the budget for summer work for counselors. The summer is actually a very busy time for the counseling office. There are the stipend. Olivia, what's the stipend for again?
Counselors.
I know that it says. Yeah. Right.
Summer work.
Summer work. Thank you. Thank you.
We might also want to address that this year at the high school, based upon a recommendation on the guidance review, we added an additional counselor at the high school due to the increased enrollment.
Exactly. Exactly.
And have a new director.
And we have a brand new director, and she's outstanding.
No, I'm just talking about the differential in the numbers. So people are aware the reason why the number has gone up so much is because we've added another guidance.
That's an
Counselor.
important point to point out, right? So in 16-17, the actual expenditure was $492,902.
Right.
And the actual in 17-18 is $626,121.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah, that stood out because we're down this year, projected for next year, we're down over 1%, after a 16.5% increase due to the personnel changes. So that's due to the actual personnel and turnover.
And those are real salaries. Okay.
Yep.
So as we move down that page, those are all of the conferences and orientation booklets and PSAT fees and supplies and BOCES services for the counseling office. So Naviance, for those of you in the high school, you can there's a technology platform, and what Linda Binion is really trying to do is, I think very nicely, is build a presence for the counseling office that is wide and accessible, and I think she's doing a very nice job with that. The next part of that journey is to really look at counseling as K-12 versus just 6-12.
I had a question about in her narrative. I assume that she wrote that narrative?
She did.
Again, very, very impressive. She talks about that journey and, what the previous model, the current model, and where we're going. But she also talked about the addition, even the mandated addition of elementary school counselors as separate from social workers. I assume that's something we have ahead as a budget impactor?
We are thinking through what it will look like. So what we are required to do, and I had sent, I actually can resend it, but I had sent some of the guidance documents home from State Ed a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago or so. But what it mandates is that children at the elementary level have access to counseling services, and so we have to figure out how to enact that, and if that is through, to what FTE will that require? Because we certainly will need something, but we're not quite.
But potentially the mandate could allow us to have a district-wide resource as opposed to a building specific.
Correct. Yep. So whatever we do, we want to make sure that not only do we meet the mandate, but God bless you.
Thank you.
But also that mandate is implemented in a way that leads to a purposeful end, right? So
Right,
if
not
we
just a body.
put a 1.0 counselor in to work with 600, more than 600, right? 900, 1,000 kids, I'm not sure that there's going to be great efficacy with that.
Right.
So we'll map all that out, and we'll have a plan for how to implement that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
Marion, it looked like you had a question. Are you okay?
I'm okay. I just think, I was going to say something, but I think it's better for another time to have that discussion when we have a real plan in place.
Okay. Terrific.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
And then if you turn to page 39, these are all the nurses. We have substitute nurses, we have summer nurses, we have other expenses related to our health program, and so you will see physicals and private school health services and subscriptions, and we have doctor's fees. That is, the district has to have a physician, and so we contract with
Sheehy.
Dr. Sheehy right in Seacliff. Right.
I had asked for that to be RFP'd. Or that, right. Okay.
Yeah. So, on the subject of RFPs, we actually have RFPs that are coming up this year, and Olivia and I were just talking this morning about, what those services are and which ones are going to go out, and we'll get a process in place for that.
Yeah, we had asked for that, and I think we got it at one point, but it certainly needs to be updated. We had a plan as to when we would RFP certain services and providers. So you're probably not aware of that because it was done last year. It would be helpful if that was updated on an annual basis, so we know what we can anticipate, and if we want to add to that in any form based upon the contracts that we see. I mean, Dr. Sheehy's group has been with us forever, and I think it's worthwhile to take a look at alternatives.
Okay,
Right.
I agree.
okay.
Okay. Are there any questions on health services?
Anyone else? All right.
Okay, and then lastly, on page 40, our psychologists, we have 7 in the district. Their summer work, and our social workers, we also have 7. And supplies and other expenses related to our social workers. Any questions there?
That, the psychologist summer work is another one where it's lower than it's been historically.
So we can control some of that,
Okay,
and so we are.
fair enough, thank you.
Okay.
And also sometimes with the summer stuff, we could just have staffing changes, that's, that we're just dealing with things differently.
Yep,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay. Let's move on to athletics.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the athletics and co-curricular section of the budget. Also a large component, so it comprises $478,000, down $17,500 from next year. And so what we have done here, what comprises that major decrease, are chaperoning costs. And so what we have done strategically is just reduce the amount of money that is available for them. So what principals will, and we've spoken about this, so we will give principals a budget on chaperoning, and then they will have to budget the monies that they have to support the programs that they need. So we want to get away from a lot of the budget transfers. We want to really be thinking very judiciously about the number of chaperones that are assigned to events and the frequency of them, and so that is why those reductions are the way they are.
Okay.
Yes.
Put your mic on, Joanna, please.
I just wanted you to review the, I'm not quite sure I understand if you're having the same activities, how we're reducing the number of chaperones.
So we will take a critical eye at the number of chaperones that are assigned to every event, and then plan around that.
I'm concerned about that as it affects just safety of kids, especially when you have large numbers of kids. If you were talking about clubs, I'm concerned about that reduction.
So we'll make sure that the events are not compromised, right?
I think if you're decreasing supervision and chaperoning, I don't know how that's not effective.
But that's for him to work
I'm
with the
just
staff to,
Making a statement.
okay.
Or the number of events.
Okay.
right? Or the number of events. So it doesn't have to be that in this year we had 10 chaperones and next year we're going to have, let's say
I'm
something
just concerned
preponderant,
with,
like
I'm just
ridiculous.
concerned with any.
I agree.
As it relates to.
I agree, but we,
Supervision of
Because
students.
We had some conversations last year,
Uh-huh.
I think where you weren't here, where there were some specific issues where we really had to add chaperones, right, for some athletic events. And am I mistaken? I thought there's some issues with like making sure kids don't like go out to the parking lot and come back in, and it ties in with some of our.
Sarah, use your mic so
Other
that we can
issues.
capture it.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sure. I'm trying really to recall what Joanna has
Oh, okay.
explained to us in the past in hopes that she can do a better job of
Okay.
talking about the chaperoning issues than I can. Not that she did. I'd like Joanna to do a better job than I'm doing.
I think I've made my point. I'm concerned about that.
you did, yeah. So the actual expenditure in 16-17 was 97,763, and so we budgeted 110 this year. We're bringing that back to 95, so it's only a couple of $1,000s off of where it was a couple of years ago. So it's not terribly far off.
This is one area that I'd say
She wants you to spend more.
put it back.
She wants you to look out.
I will look at it.
It's
Okay.
not
Okay.
as high as 106.
She wants you to look
Okay.
at
So it's
it.
not a huge gap, but
I'll look at it. No problem.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. And then as we move down, these are various clubs and supplies for clubs, and
Okay.
they don't amount to a lot of money, but they are there. That's page 41. And then,
Peter,
yes, ma'am.
clubs.
Yes, sir. ma'am.
I would like for there to be some greater supervision and oversight on clubs on terms of where students are actually attending, what the students are looking for in a club, and what benefit is coming out of it. For students, I think that all of us who've had students in the middle school and high school have had experiences where the clubs did not meet, or where the kids, in building their resume for college application, sign in for the clubs. I mean, I think, anything that keeps our kids in school and busy and not at loose ends is obviously a positive, but I want to make sure that we're utilizing the money that's allocated in the best possible manner.
Absolutely. That came up, I think at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about that as well. And so when I went back to the office and I asked Betty about where we keep all this, we have a lot of so if there's a specific club that there is a concern for, speak with me about that and I will look into that. But we have a lot of information and a lot of backup on all the clubs and their meeting. And so I don't want to cast like if there's a concern, let me know and I'll specifically
And
address
I'd like
that.
to say
But
that
you're right.
hasn't been my
Yeah.
experience.
or mine, I feel like. I mean,
Right.
my kids are here, but I've had very positive experiences.
Right, I have too.
It doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
No, of course,
Right.
of course, of course.
Yep.
But I just don't think it's fair to just say one blanket statement that, I don't know why.
I didn't make a blanket statement. I asked that it be looked at to make sure that they're being actually attended and supervised properly.
That we'd all have the experience, and I'm just stating that I haven't had that experience. You said we've all had that experience who had kids in the school, and
Well, they have reviewed the clubs, and some clubs have been eliminated for that very reason.
but
That's what I
certainly
mean, that
my
we've
kids have
had
not
all
been in
the
every
experience.
club,
No,
so-
I'm not saying, I think I prefaced it with, I just want to make sure that we are properly allocating the money. That's all I'm asking, so that it's properly documented and supervised, and that we're having clubs that are meeting the students' changing interest and needs as time goes on.
okay, let's move
That's
to. Did we
Page
get
42.
42?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and just to put a period on that, we are doing that exercise with the union in this spring
Okay.
through a committee.
Okay.
So we'll get back to you on that. Okay, so page 42 is your athletic stipends, coaching salaries. So you'll see the boys and girls teams and the supervision associated with that. And then there is we allocate money for when our teams make playoffs, so that's a good number to.
You doing well in?
Yep, absolutely. So there's this is where our clerical salary is, sports physicals, sports equipment, and then all of the AEDs and athletic awards and our trainer and reconditioning and the supplies related to the athletic program and our BOCES fees. So you'll see that is reasonably flat from one year to the next. It's down $9,000. And so the sports equipment, Don wrote to this in his narrative, but there's an explanation for what he needed last year that he did not need this year. So there's not a reduction in program. Right, exactly.
Okay,
You're welcome.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, so transportation we talked about at the last meeting, so we don't need to review that. What I did want to say is that based on the board's discussion and direction at the last meeting, we did go and we are in the process of evaluating an early bus and a late bus or buses and what the costs and practicality and feasibility of that would be.
Yeah.
Don't get excited
Right.
because it is very much in the research stages, and we are also looking at the practicality of reducing the mileage limits, extending the reduction in mileage limits to the high school program as well, to 1 mile to mesh with the middle school program. So we have done we've done the ridership study, and we're looking at those numbers. And what I would say to everybody out there because I talk with people all the time about the traffic on Glen Cove Avenue, and I would say, put your kids on the bus. The ridership is very, very poor, right? It will save you time.
Speaking of something you hear about a lot, just to
Right.
reiterate yet again, there is no way to keep the bus levels as they are, distances, and reduce the expense for busing since we're sending around these empty buses.
Not necessarily, because you have to plan the route out, and then you have to plan for the children to be on the bus.
Okay.
And then because anybody could, decide at any moment, we're all going to take the bus, and then if they can all show up and you wouldn't have enough seats for them.
But isn't that state law? That's not our
It is.
determination.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
State law.
Yes, that is.
Well, state law was changed.
Was it was
used to,
adjusted.
it was adjusted. It used to be
Adjusted.
that you had to have the capacity for everyone to potentially,
Right.
so your kinetic busing capacity had to be full.
Right.
But that was adjusted to, you could take a actuarial view and actually have a different take
Right.
on that.
Yes.
Ridership, yep.
So our ridership is at about a third. And so that means that 2/3 of the children are sitting on Glen Cove Avenue in the morning with their parents. So
Yeah, 100% of the fumes and the congestion of the buses is
Right.
pumping out. Okay.
correct.
Great.
Please take the bus.
Maybe you could send me a bus? Then I'll get a bus.
I know you have to be within the mileage limits though.
The problem is that there are a lot of kids who have after-school activities and early morning activities, and that has increased with the changes that we have made. So that means that if you need to get your child there, there's no bus for them.
All right.
Okay. And the last part of our review for the expense side tonight is community services, and that's the 7140 lines, page 45 of your budget lines. And so this comprises $53,000. And this is our community rec program. There's $20,000 in salaries. There's $7,000 in supplies. And we have services for our seniors of $6,000. There is money to continue the services that we contract with through CASA for $15,000. And the 7144,450 line is a typo. And that $5,000, we are not funding supplies for the CASA group or any community group. So that $5,000 will not be in the revised budget that you get.
Okay.
Okay?
Peter, I wanted to make a suggestion on that.
Yes, sir.
I think we were all varying degrees of pleased or relieved or whatever you want to call it to hammer out that CASA agreement last session. That was the formative year and it was just starting. I don't particularly see a reason why this has to remain flat for year 2. So just putting that out there.
So let's talk about that. So if we want to revise that
You have the
number.
5 there right now, and you felt comfortable, move it up a line, make it 20. It's a growing organization. They're already planning things and doing things, and they're formed. They're going.
I'm not comfortable with that, Dave.
I was sorry. I was mid-sentence. If I
I'm sorry, I thought you were
I
done.
was almost there. Let's show our continuing support for them as they grow, that we want to grow with them and continue to use them in a larger way, because these things have a way of being angular, and we want to keep that not flat, but pointing up in the right direction.
I was going to say that we haven't even had one presentation yet from CASA. We have a number of presentations that we've had over a number of years that have been funded by our parent organizations, and we thank them very much, and they have done that. I personally would actually like to see how these programs are developed and implemented in conjunction with what we currently have before we start increasing numbers. Certainly, we don't put in a number for specific people that we contract with as a line item in any budget. So I would like to see what's going on first before I increase the number.
Point taken.
Wait, I think Dave, let's let Joanna speak
I'm
first.
just not clear on,
Sorry.
you're not clear on what's happened. There are several programs that have occurred this year. Certainly the organization has grown tremendously over the course of the last year. We have 3 programs coming up. I'm not sure.
The programs that we are specifically contracting for that that I understood were going to be done in the school. And I have not seen, I know that you've had your own forums.
I don't think there was any agreement to have where we were going to have those.
That was my understanding from the contract. Usually a contractual service is provided to the school itself, to the.
I think the effort is in collaboration with the school district, not necessarily where the event is held. But I think you'll appreciate the fact that in March, April, and May, we will be using school facilities to do our programming.
So my point that I was going to say is, without relitigating the need for CASA, I think it's important to remember that as a community, there was a realization that despite the very laudable efforts of the parent organization, we had a problem and have a problem in our district that is not adequately being addressed, and CASA was formed to help support that through our schools. And I am just saying that as a board, continuing to support that, even a tiny little bit more strongly, is important. That's my only point.
Okay. Anyone else?
So how do you want to handle that?
I want to move the $5,000 up one line to keep it.
I could support Dave on that.
I
Okay.
certainly support Dave on that.
Anyone else? Rich?
No, I understand the importance of it, but I would like to see how it's used to begin with. So I do agree that it's going to serve a very important need in the community, but I would like to see what happens first before I go ahead and increase funding.
That was my point. It's not denigrating the work. As I've said, I understand the importance of the work. I just would like to see what we are getting for our 15,000 before we increase the number.
Everybody stop for a second. Marianne, I'm going to ask you not to interrupt again, and I'm going to ask Herman, and then
I'm not
Sarah,
interrupting. Rich was done.
Were you done, Rich? Herman?
Are you done? I actually don't see this as an increase. We had allocated 20,000 in total for CASA. It remains at 20,000. It's wrapped into one line. I'm very comfortable with just making it a $20,000 line.
I can assure you that CASA is very appreciative of.
Okay, you're not supposed to talk yet.
I'm sorry.
Sarah?
I was going to say, you're budgeting 20, right? And you have a contract that covers the current
This year, 15.
right? So you can budget 20 and you can still have the conversation several months from now about what that contract's going to look like after CASA has had more time to develop their programming too. But if it's not in the budget,
It's done.
there's no way it's going to happen.
Right. Right. Dave, I think you had another comment.
My only other comment is if the baseline for seeing exactly what they're doing before we budget it, it doesn't really explain why we just threw $30,000 into toner without thinking about it, and we can't put $5,000 more into this.
Okay.
Because we actually buy toner and we have an actual expenditure which we base the number on.
Marianne, please. We're all speaking civilly. Let's keep it civil. We each get to make a comment.
Comparing a service to toner is not really a very good comparison. That was my point.
They're both numbers that we are being asked our opinion about how they are spent. And I think that's a viable comparison. We're talking about $103 or $4 million budget, and we're talking about $5,000 more for something that this community as a whole has identified as an incredibly important priority. I think that's a lot more important than toner. That's my only point.
Okay. Sarah, did you have something else? Joanna?
Good, I just wasn't sure Joanna was.
No.
You're good?
I appreciate it. I appreciate the additional monies
Okay, so...
on behalf of CASA.
This is how I feel. This is a big problem. Substance use and abuse is a big problem. CASA's formation in itself and the community support to create an organization like this has in itself raised the discussion about drugs and alcohol use and abuse. And I say use because not everybody is going to be an abuser, and there's a whole lot of use happening that is not going to get to the abuse level but is still very dangerous. And putting us making a statement that we are supporting CASA even more. I believe in them. I believe that they're going to follow through with the programs that they're putting in place. Peter meets with them regularly. I think you feel that they're moving
They are.
and are not stepping on the toes of the other programs that we've done. So I too support making that a $20,000 line.
Okay. So I'll make the, go ahead, Joanna.
I appreciate your comments, Tony. Just one point I want to make. Let's not look at abuse as heroin addiction. Because we've got a lot of other kids that are abusing a lot of other substances.
Sure.
So just in terms of framing the concept, I wanted to share that.
Sure. Okay, anyone else? All right,
All right, so
Move on.
I'll make the change.
please.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the
Okay.
expense part of the budget review tonight. You guys were really efficient. Thank you very much. Yes, you were. Yes, you were. So the next time we meet on March 15th, we will look at staffing, employee benefits, debt service, some of our other financing sources and fund balance. But also tonight, the board had asked me to work with Olivia on putting together a 5-year revenue projection, and this will find its way onto the website tomorrow as well. And so if you want to take this document and put this in your budget book, it would go into section A3 as an appendix. And so what we tried to do here was look at all of the revenues that come into the district, and they so for the approved budget for 17-18, those revenues totaled $17,624,940, $17,624,940.03. And so what we are projecting for 18-19 is $18,781,973.14. And so what I would suggest that the board do is take this document with you. I would review it over the course of the next time, get us any of your feedback that you'd like to give us. You will see that on pages 1 through 6, there is a lot of information for the board to read on the pilots and the peaking stations and history of interest and how we arrived at these numbers, because when you project revenue out over the course of any length of time, you can only do that with setting of a set of assumptions. So we had to go through those, and those assumptions may come true or they may not come true, but there are footnotes and notes for all of how those numbers were calculated. But if you take a look at how the revenue is projected out to 22-23, it raises to, we're projecting it raises to about $18.5 million. So take this, we'll add this to the discussion at the next meeting, so the board has time to read it and
Sure.
ask us any
And
questions.
discuss it, yeah.
If you have any questions on this, please let us know ahead of time so we can have those answers ready for you on the 15th. And then that would essentially conclude our budget discussion for this evening, as long as the board agrees.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do have a comment. So I think that when we look at the budget as a whole, just historically going back, and this is going to tie in with the strategic planning part that we're working on now. So going back there, I guess it was probably 2012, 2013, we thought there was going to be, it was before I was on the board, a shortfall on the budget, where we would really have a layoff. I believe it was of 18 people, 15 of whom were teachers. And we asked the teachers to come back and open up their contract, and they graciously did that for us. Right after that, we put in Elementary Plus, Columbia's Teachers College, IB, SVOs. And I'm not saying any of these programs are not valuable or invaluable. I'm just talking as a whole, we put these programs in, and that was the reason why I asked at the last meeting that we collect data, because what I've really had on the board when I've asked a review of these programs is a dearth of data on the efficacy, on how other districts do them. I would really like, I know you're new to the district this year, so this would be a very difficult task for you, and we're in the process of strategic planning. There's certainly other areas, like coding, that could be brought in, that, is as a foreign language. I think there are questions about how the Elementary Plus is being implemented, if there are any holes in Columbia's Teachers College. Certainly the IB program is evolving, but I would like the budget to be viewed in conjunction with the strategic planning, where we think about the long-term, the sustainability of the programs that we put in. For the public who doesn't understand how salaries and the budget work, maybe this is your first meeting, maybe you don't know, about 80% of our budget, more or less, right, is really personnel, right?
Yes, salary and benefits.
Salary and benefits, right? So it's basically personnel, and teachers and other teachers' assistants and other people in different staffing positions. They have salary. Some of them have steps, and then there's increment. So, and then you have the 2% tax cap on top of that. So when you're looking at a long-term plan, if you have a 2% tax cap and you have your salaries and your benefits, we all know, all of us who are in the private sector, how much healthcare costs go up every year. You have healthcare costs, disability, retirement, all of those things are taken into consideration. So I would like, when we're doing this, to tie it into what are our goals? What's mandated by the state? What do we hope to achieve? And how much is going to cost for us to achieve that going forward? Not just can we afford it in next year's budget, but can we afford it 5 years down the road, and what are we doing well? What are we doing efficiently? What can we do better? It's not just about the dollars, it's about how the dollars are spent, right? So we want to get the best bang for our buck. And I don't feel that for a long time in this district, we've taken a long-term view when we've decided to put in these different programs. Now, obviously, you get thrown a curveball, right? Core curriculum, the complete change in the math program. I don't really think that was anticipated. Maybe, I don't know if it even could have been anticipated. I don't know. I would venture to guess it wasn't.
So there were definitely things that we certainly planned for, like the SVOs, like the IB, like the Teachers College, all those things. Those are choices that we made. The math program. Now, some of those choices that we made were made in order to, and I'm assuming that they were made in order to achieve another goal, right, through the Common Core or whatever it might be. However, the point I think you make is a good one in that Rob and I have been talking about how to go back and evaluate the SVO work, the FLES work, the IB work, and so we're capturing all of that information. And we will look at the financial side of that. So when we bring that back to the board, it's just going to take us a little bit of time to put it together.
Yeah, I understand it's a long-term project, but I just want us to bear in mind as we move forward, we're going to have financial constraints, and at some point, you're going to have, this board, whether I'm sitting on it or someone else is sitting on it, is going to be forced to pick and choose. And I want to make sure we have the data that we have to pick and choose wisely, because this has been a community that traditionally has been multi-generational and has had a very disparate economic base. Your child could be sitting next to a child of a laborer to a child of a hedge fund person. And I would like to think that we could keep this as a community. I do closings all the time, and I do it in very elite school districts like Scarsdale and Bronxville, and their taxes are astronomical. And what has happened in those communities is my clients will gladly write the check for $28,000 for the first half of their tax, not even for their full year tax. But they'll say to me, I'm writing this check, and as soon as those kids graduate, I'm out of here. And we have not been a community like that. We have had a very active senior population, and I would like to think that we would make this, do our best to achieve our goals, but keep this a place where a wide variety of people can afford to move here and stay here after their children are raised.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's, I think we,
I was just going to say, on the revenue projections, the detail on the assumptions is terrific. And to Marion's point, I think the way you've started structuring the narratives in the budget has gotten you way down the road on those things already.
Yeah.
I think we've made a great start.
Great, thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, Olivia.
okay, let's move to, thank you. Let's move to public comment.
So
'Cause
if
it's been a long time.
Yep, if it's okay with you, it's okay with me, we can send our administrators home so they're
Yes, so they're fresh and
bright-eyed
ready for tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning.
For all those exhausted sports night
Right.
kids.
You don't have to go. We're not kicking you out.
Yes, you don't have to go. You're welcome to stay for public
thank you
comment.
all for
Might
coming
be
very
interesting,
much.
but thank you for coming. Okay. Public comment?
That would be none.
Anyone? Yeah, anything. Anything at all. Anything at all.
Absolutely
But you do have to tell us your name. Please come up to the microphone, and you have to tell us your name and town of residence. We ask that you tell us your name and town of residence, please. And if you make a big statement, like a lengthy statement, we also ask that you give it to Betty.
No problem.
All right, thank you.
Is this on?
I don't know, is it red?
Yes.
Okay, terrific,
It's
yes.
green. My name is Teresa Simone, and I'm a parent of 2 North Shore alumni who have graduated. And I'm a mother to an educator who is actually a sub within this school district. And I'm also a mother-in-law to a teacher within the Manhasset District. So I guess you can say I'm certainly a proponent of school safety and the well-being of its population. I am a current Glen Head resident, and I love our community, as Mary Ann said, and I am prepared to stay here. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I founded a not-for-profit awareness campaign for children with developmental disabilities over 20 years ago. That campaign was born of the need to raise the nation's outlook on specific developmental diseases, including autism, which at that time did not even have a designation, the DSM-4. I know no one believes that, but that's the truth. Its success in targeting large groups of people within the arena of developmental disabilities and working with groups that had their focus within those areas made us a national success in a very short period of time. I'm here tonight to address a seedling idea that I think may have some merit and is based on my prior knowledge of starting a grassroots campaign for preemptive change by utilizing already well-established groups within their fields that have power and strength in their sheer numbers. In the hope of supporting students and schools in our community and throughout the nation, I propose to start a movement within the district that works with the National Education Association and the New York State United Teachers, who combined have over 3.5 million members. This effort would involve asking the NEA and the New York SUT to distribute a short survey that would go to each and every single public school nationally, which would then be delivered to each student's family. This inquiry would ask questions on people's view on specific current gun laws. The object of this survey would be twofold. One, to create a unified voice throughout the nation about each family's concern for their children, and secondly, to create a database of answers for a majority view on these pertinent issues. These views are not party-driven, would be apolitical, and would give an inside view on people's current beliefs. A united voice across the nation would certainly help these brave students who are speaking up and standing up for change within our country, one that is currently failing to protect them within the school environment. Those affected and victimized by these senseless shootings are not described as Republicans or Democrats or independents. They're individuals who have lost their lives, their innocence, and for most, a portion of their former mental well-being. This alliance is a symbol of our willingness to protect our children, our students, our teachers, our staff, and our families. I have a brief outline of what some of those questions may be, but I am superbly open to modifying them and adding to the survey. I respectfully suggest that this multiple choice form be brief, concise, and returned via email, fax, or mail. It's critical that we take action immediately to combat these killings and send a clear message that we are standing beside these students and schools in general, and we are making a change now. I've created a title for the campaign after the surveys and the database has completed. We're not married to that, but I am actually an interior designer by trade, so logos and design are a part of my inner being. I have a copy of a letter to the editor that was in the local Herald newspaper just a week ago from a former teacher in Belmore who had a similar suggestion to reaching out to the National Federation of Teachers. I want to thank you for your time and consideration for this, to create a campaign for proactive change for the current gun laws.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, thank you. I'm Grant Kletter. I am a parent in the community. I have a child in third grade as well as a daughter in pre-K that'll be in the schools next year. On school safety, I appreciate the efforts of our leadership so far and our administrators who may still be here to take quick action to explore what we can do. I'm part of the school safety committee, and I look forward to contributing as I can with that. One thing I wanted to bring up, something that's immediate, that can be done, that I think we should consider, is removing the elections from our schools. I know this has been talked about in different forums. I don't know if it's been talked about amongst the board. And I know there are complications as it relates to it for the general and primary elections and things that need to be worked through, but I believe they can be worked through as the law states it. But putting that aside, that may take a little more time. What I think we immediately should do is set an example to the Board of Elections, but set an example in school safety in general, is to remove our school elections, the budget, as well as our board elections from the schools effective with this May vote. And my understanding, the district has the complete authority and ability to do so. And I think we have many avenues and venues to explore where we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi there, everybody. Noah Blumenthal, Seacliff. It's been a while, so I've saved up all my time.
Okay, for the record, that's not true.
A lot of this actually will be a repeat performance for those who were listening 5 years ago when I said a lot of the same things. So I can only imagine the deluge of fear and outrage and concern and anxiety and the whole spectrum of communication that you all have been receiving. Not even going into the inner feelings that you all have before you even start to receive any and all of that. With all of that, fear and anxiety is our emotional states that cause us to shut down the prefrontal cortex of our brains, and that's the place that makes really good decisions. So I want to challenge, and you guys sound like you're very far down the road, so I may be too late in a lot of what I want to say here, but I'd like to challenge some of what you may already have concluded, and I hope that you'll keep an open mind. And I'd like to start with a question. Everybody feel free to play along. Do you know how many kids die each year from mass shootings in school?
Too many.
Too many. There are too many kids who die from everything. How many kids die from sports accidents? Too many. How many kids die from tripping in the bathtub? Too many. But if you're making fiscal decisions for us, then I'm going to argue, and not just fiscal decisions, but decisions that influence the way students perceive their own safety, the way students perceive you, the way students perceive their school and their educational experience. And frankly, if you're spending my money, I want clearer answers. So, on average, over the last approximately 40 years, about 20 kids die each year from mass shootings in school. Too many. That's tragic. How many teenagers die each year from suicide? Approximately 100 times that number. Over 1,800. There are over 5,700 teens who die each year from motor vehicle accidents, 786 from poisoning, 550 from drowning. While 20 students dying each year from mass shootings is tragic, if we are going to structure an enormous amount of our time, attention, energy around trying to save kids' lives, there are much more likely ways that we can save lives. I would not buy a lottery ticket and on the assumption that I was going to win $150 million, spend $20,000 on a security system to make sure that I was safe if the lottery ticket in fact wins. And in some ways it seems like, or it feels like, this is what we're doing. I know this is not a popular view and probably not one that you have been deluged with emails telling you to hold off, don't make quick decisions, slow down. This is not as big a deal as CNN and whatever other news outlets you're looking at are telling you. Another question, are you familiar with the phrase, "you cannot protect a soft target"? As soon as you securitize the school, and more power to you once you do, what are you doing for the next school play? What are you doing for the spring concert? What are you doing for the football game? What are you doing for graduation? The idea that you can't protect a soft target is the idea that no matter how far out you put the security, at some point that line ends and you can't stop. The only way to really secure soft targets is to prevent the root cause. And connections to the police department and connections, all of these things that you talked about. Locked doors and windows, professional development of the staff focused on this as opposed to actual education purposes. Deployment of security, we're going to spend more money on security. You're doing a security audit, taking proposals, that's going to cost money. I cannot for the life of me imagine how you're engaging the Department of Homeland Security. I'm all for the RAVE app, it's free, sure, go ahead, let's do that. You're going to put together a task force with, you said, all stakeholders. My strong suspicion is that folks who view this the way I do, that the rational view on this is that this problem is blown so far out of proportion in our minds right now that we're making poor decisions about it, are not the ones who are going to flock to these stakeholder groups. Those who are most afraid are going to be the ones who flock there. If you want to change this, and if you really want security, the ironic thing is that the things that would actually improve that are not the things on the list that you provided earlier, or at least not most of them. They are the things that create more mental security for the students throughout the district. And they're the things that when you invest in mental health and mental security for the kids throughout the district, you're really investing in every single student, not just the fear that one student becomes a mass shooter. So hire more teachers, more counselors, more psychologists, more social workers. Hire a culture director, someone whose job it is to build a supportive culture throughout every building in the district. Start a student mentoring program so that every student of a lower grade gets connected with someone at a higher grade and has a built-in social infrastructure. I know that there are problems with each of these solutions, but these are solutions that get at broad scale across the boards, mental security for the students all over. And if you really want to still spend money on security, here's a couple more ideas. Spend money on a gun buyback program. Get the guns out of the community. Some people don't want to give up their guns. You know what? Buy a bunch of gun lockers. Make them free to anybody who has unsecured guns in their homes. This is the only way you can stop something like this. If it's going to happen in this community, you cannot stop it with security at the door. You can only stop it by changing the way you take care of all of the kids who would otherwise slip through the cracks before they ever get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. I just, I don't want to have a back and forth with you, but I just want to assure you that many of the things that you brought up, and most importantly, that creating those connections with kids is something that we talk about and we have spoken about all week. And I assure you that every discussion we have had has not been about how to secure the buildings or how to put guns in the hands of people who are in the buildings, security guards or teachers. So we're having those discussions, and we understand, and our staff is having the discussions. And it's a point of pride for me personally that in this district, before this event happened, that we strive to make certain that every child in this district has an adult that they feel a connection to and that have someone to talk to. So understand that I know what you're saying, and that national conversation is happening, but the administration, and we're all talking about every aspect of this because you can't help it, right? And but understand that we're looking at every portion of this, and it's not lost on us that connections for students and support for students is paramount.
I appreciate that, and thank you for saying that and reassuring in that regard. And I do believe that unquestionably. I mean, look, I know you, I know many of you, and I do really trust you in many ways. And I just want to make sure that every time you're talking about spending $1 or a minute on the security protocol side of this, you are challenging it with the ferocity that you were challenging the $5,000 in the budget earlier tonight. Mm-hmm. That is $1 or a minute that could be spent on this side of the equation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Greg Perlis, President, North Shore Schools Federated Employees. For those of you who don't know, we are the union that represents the teachers and the secretaries and the TAs here at North Shore. I rise before you on behalf of those teachers and secretaries and TAs with a resolution that was passed by unanimous consent today, actually, at our monthly meeting of our governing body, the Representative Council. Whereas the recent shootings in Parkland, Florida, have drawn attention to the national pandemic of gun violence in the United States, with averages of about 13,000 gun homicides a year, 21,000 gun suicides a year, 500 gun accidents a year, and 300 gun deaths from undetermined causes a year. And whereas the recent shootings in Parkland, Florida, have additionally drawn attention to the national pandemic of gun violence in schools, with more than 130 school shootings and nearly 60 college shootings since 2000. And whereas prominent figures have called for armed teachers and more guns in schools, despite the reality that increased gun ownership correlates plainly with increased gun deaths, and decreased gun ownership correlates plainly with decreased gun deaths. And whereas a grassroots student movement has emerged to demand common sense gun reforms across the nation, therefore be it resolved that North Shore Schools Federated Employees resolve that North Shore Schools Federated Employees support students, calls on the board to support students and faculty and staff in exercising their political speech rights to the fullest extent permissible under the law during the planned March 14th walkout and subsequent related actions, and urges the board to do the same. And be it further resolved that North Shore Schools Federated Employees calls on the board to partner with law enforcement to ensure student safety during that March 14th walkout. And be it further resolved that North Shore Schools Federated Employees calls on the board to resist any efforts to arm teachers, and rather adopt prudent, sensible safety reforms under advisement from law enforcement. And I just want to reiterate that that's a resolution that passed by unanimous consent from our governing body. And I'll additionally add that we will be partners to you in planning for those things. Mm-hmm. But those things we feel firmly need to happen, or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Hi, Lauren Trubisi, Glen Head. Well, you don't want to follow Noah and Greg, man, this, with all these prepared remarks, but, and I apologize, we were at the water meeting, and I missed your plan, your focus, your discussion on safety. I just wanted to bring a couple of items to your attention. When I left Wall Street 5 years ago, my entrepreneurial efforts took me to give me business interest in Florida and California. About 18 months ago, we were very close to relocating before Michael would start college to Florida. We gave it a heavy consideration. When I told people where I would buy a home, no one had heard about it. It was Parkland, Florida. I had a deposit on a home. The former mayor, Michael, is a good friend of mine. The current mayor became a good friend of mine. The superintendent is outstanding. The school is equally impressive as this school is. The town is equally affluent. The people are equally engaged. And the students are, as you have seen and will continue to see, absolutely incredible. I was blown away by the students. So I had said if we would move during their school years, this would be a really great place, something that could actually be as good as North Shore. When this happened, we have so many family and friends there. So the first reaction was who's not okay, who's okay, find out. And the second reaction was, and I didn't really think of it initially, but that could have been my children if I had decided to go down 18 months ago. And I would have had 3 children in the high school. And the kids knew it. The kids visited the schools. They met with teachers. So when I talk about it, I really talk about it from a personal point of view. What I hope, and again, I didn't hear the presentation or discussion, I hope that we don't overreach to the prior points, that we stay focused on what this community and this board and this school can do for these kids at this time. It's very, very important that we apply tourniquets. It's very, very important that we participate in the federal discussions. It's very important that we explain the craziness that we find difficult to comprehend to our children. But we do have to focus, I believe, on what we can do in moderate terms to ensure the safety and protection of our children and our teachers and our administration and all of the people in the school. There were some great points. I mean, you can limit the entrances, you can limit egress, you can provide police, security. I'm not sure what the answer is. I just think that we should do everything we can, look at everything we can to make these buildings and this property as safe as possible. Personally, as is always the case, I'm happy to do anything I can do financially, participating in meetings, in groups, and task forces, because I don't believe there's anything more important that we'll ever work on than protecting our kids. So if we can avoid the politics, and if we can avoid, respect the politics, respect all the points of views, and then just really focus on the few issues that we can actually do, the few things we can actually change to make it 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees safer, it would be most appreciated by me and many other parents in the community. And again, anything I can do, and I speak for a lot of the parents, anything we can do, we're happy to do and support you in whatever you decide.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Yes. Sure.
Hi, Andrew Cross, Glenn Head, and also teacher here. I just had a request, actually, seeing the people here speaking. I was wondering if it might be possible in the future when we have such an issue like school safety to have the comments from the public to be done before the budget review. Because I saw a few young moms here who have to go and put their kids to bed to go to Glen Head or Glenwood Landing, and they had to leave. And I think that's a shame. So it's something I think you should consider in the future with issues like this and when things like this come up. Of course, the budget's important, but I think hearing from the community and as many members as possible is important. And just consider that perhaps for the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Yes?
Hi, I'm Sophia Caldwell. I'm a Glen Head resident, and I have children in the district, in the elementary school and the high school now. One of the items that was brought up at the last meeting was regarding the science curriculum and having a teacher added at the Glen Head school, as well as expanding the equipment that we have at the school and the program there as well. There was when we looked at the budget last week, it looked like there was a large portion that there was an increase from last year on equipment. As we were going through it tonight, I didn't see the more detail included there. So I just want to make sure that that is something that we are going to focus on in the upcoming year, because it is something that is critical for the children to have exposure to. And I do believe, I shouldn't say I believe, I'm not sure how it compares to the other schools in the district. And I don't know if we're supposed to have equal level programming at the different schools
You mean at the elementary schools?
In the elementary
yes,
schools.
very much so.
For like math, we have all uniform math. If we don't have the same amount of teachers for a specific subject like science compared to math, are we doing the same? Are the kids at the Glen Head school doing the same at children at other schools?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Sure. Hi. That's all comparably distributed across the district. So the number of teachers on a certain grade level might vary based on enrollment, but if you look at the comparability of the class size, we try to keep that comparable. I think it's the STEAM teacher that you're talking about in terms of science. So this year we have one. So last year the district hired one STEAM teacher, Adrienne Kay, and she works in all three schools. And this year we have been recruiting as a second STEAM teacher, and we have just not been able to find the right candidate.
And that's in this year's budget?
That's in this year's budget.
So not the budget we're going through for next year. It's in
Okay.
this year. So that's why you don't see a change. I'm sorry to interrupt,
No,
but that's why
fine.
you don't see a
That's
change.
exactly right.
Okay. And how about space for the children to do their science experiments? Is that something that will be assessed and?
Oh, absolutely. So there are, so some of that work is done in the classroom, right? Because the science curriculum is taught by the general ed teacher, right? So whomever your son or daughter has for whatever grade they're in, the classroom teacher is responsible for teaching them their ELA and their mathematics and their science and their social studies. And the STEAM classes are part of the special area strand that kids go to, same with FLES and phys ed and art and music and all that. So that if a school is larger, let's say, so I'll use Glenwood Landing as an example. It has a higher enrollment, right, and more sections of children than Glen Head or Seacliff. They might have more of the STEAM teacher because of the number of the sections, but the access to the STEAM teacher for students in third grade would be equivalent across the entire district. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to make, because, science is something that is growing and evolving.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that the children at the elementary level are getting that exposure at an early time.
Absolutely.
And that we're growing that within the budget as well.
Absolutely, right. So you won't see it, so that's a really good point, right? So to President Labadie's point, there you won't see an increase in the budget line of teachers from the 17-18 budget to the 18-19 budget because it was budgeted for in this year and it hasn't been filled yet.
And is in this year's budget includes buying new material
Yeah.
for science.
And there are new materials in next year's budget as well, right? So we that all gets allocated. We don't always, it's a little tricky for us to hardline exactly what's going to happen because we build the budget for 2018-19 essentially 18 months before we intend to use any of it. So so some of what is here is our very best guess and projection about how we'll use that money, but if there's supply money, we may, it's right now it's for general purpose at the elementary level, and then the principals work with Rob Klabicki, myself, Olivia, the directors, really figure out what's the best use of that funding and what one school needs in one year, maybe another school doesn't need in another. So we make those decisions based on need.
Okay, and
Okay.
I know the PTO from the school had their big fundraiser.
They did.
And they want to allocate that money
They did. They had a great
to
wish
that,
list.
to that program.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 They
Okay,
did.
thank you.
Okay,
That's
thanks,
great.
Sophia.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
I'll be rather quick. Justin Kletter, I'm in Seacliff. I have a son in kindergarten, Seacliff Schools, and I have twins coming up right behind him. Two very quick things. I want to reiterate what a lot of people have said tonight about the concern for school safety, especially having children in kindergarten and over at the Seacliff School. I'm also on the safety committee for the Seacliff School, and our concern right now was really voicing to you about the election itself and how that is as undertaken for the school. It's one of the softer days there where people are coming in and out of the school. I'm very happy with the school itself and what they're doing and the attention that's been given to this. However, that is one of those days where I think a very simple action could probably ease the minds of many people in the community very quickly. So that was one point. Second point I wanted to bring up about a completely different topic, which is the budget. Looking at the overall numbers, I was looking at the special ed line, and when you look at the total decrease, well, it's actually an increase in the budget, but the sections that have been decreased, you look at special education, and you're losing a significant amount from that budget line. Overall, if you look at the sections that have been decreased, central services, plant management, insurance, special education, and transportation, overall, special education is 43% of that decrease. So looking at that, it was, I understand it's one teacher that is being moved around, or the behaviorist, and I understand, Superintendent, that, you stated that everything is going to continue along the way it is, and you've looked at that. Percentage-wise, I'm a numbers guy. I look at numbers, and I see that number coming out towards next year. I don't think everybody's going to realize that it was one move, that number is out. And then you look at next year, and you're down $200,000 in the special education portion of the school. So I just wanted to put that on record. I know you guys have a very difficult job trying to put this together. It's a very large budget, and I know a lot goes into it. So I just wanted to voice that. And at the end, if there is anything that I can do for school safety, please feel free to let me know. Again, Justin Kletter, I'm in the district over in Seacliff.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
May I just, on the election?
Sure.
Right. So on the election question, so the school board and budget election, annual election that happens in May, that happens at the high school, not at the Seacliff School, right? So we'll look at, we can look at that, but that happens in the gym, and so we could look at that. The other issue related to the general elections at Seacliff, right? Because Seacliff is identified as a polling place, and Glenwood Landing. We can. It's very hard. The county Board of Elections designates where those are, so we don't have a lot of say over where that is. So in response to that context, next year schools are closed for a conference day on election day. So I'll have staff in the building, but I won't have students in the building on the November election day.
This year, but
This-
next school year. Next school year.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
next school year.
Yes.
Yes, November
Right,
18th.
November of 18.
Okay, so that was something that came up after the primarily at Seacliff this year. Okay, sure.
Okay.
Can I just, oh, sorry.
Go up, and then Mary Ann.
I appreciate you looking into to the high school and that concern, and I understood it was at the high school, and I think even though my kid may not be there, I think it is important to the kids and the staff that are there regardless. The general election, I know the Board of Elections has to approve it, but I believe there's other avenues. If you look at the law, you can have it in churches, you can have it in the fire departments, you can have
But
it...
we don't
Right, but we
designate
don't-
it.
No, I
We don't-
understand. But
we-
what I'm asking is the district take a lead in pressuring our politicians and pressuring the Board of Elections to make that change.
Oh, that I've made clear. So I'm going to write a letter to the Board of Elections saying that I don't want them in my schools, and they will likely take it under advisement. Right, but I don't have a say. I definitely don't have a say in where the polling sites are. Now, I will tell you that if you look at, I think it's School Boards Association, New York State School Boards Association is advocating for school districts to be able to say no thank you in the law. So that is something that, and we've been working with SuperLAC through how to move that along, but that's a piece of advocacy that New York State School Boards is pursuing fairly aggressively.
And let's just add, as you know, as parents of young children in the district, I encourage you. I'm very happy to hear that you're on this Health and Safety Committee, but I encourage you to look into perhaps applying to be on the Legislative Action Committee, which could help push that forward.
That's a great idea.
Much harder, and it would be wonderful to have younger, parents of younger children drawn into our leadership teams and becoming really part of the decision-making process in the district, and really, coming in and joining.
No, I appreciate that, and I find it
Okay.
important. No, but I guess, and I thank you, I think we're on the same page of removing the election, just how do we do it?
Yes, we are.
Sorry, Mary Ann.
Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to some of the comments, Noah's in particular, and I do agree. I understand the numbers. Far more people die every year of illegal handgun usage than they do from assault rifles. The numbers aren't even comparable. And I know that as a practical matter, you cannot secure any building against any and all potential threats. But I don't believe investing in security measures where we have better procedures for knowing who is in our buildings, how our doors are being opened and closed, how they're being maintained, better cameras. Those address safety issues far beyond assault rifles. And I personally don't believe investing in having a security analysis done of our buildings is a waste of money, given all the potential dangers that lurk out there. Just because we can't protect our children against all dangers doesn't mean we shouldn't take what steps are reasonable to protect our children and our staff as well, and everyone who comes in and out of our buildings. I think we have a duty to make sure that we have done what is reasonably necessary within certain cost parameters to protect our children and our faculty and our staff.
Okay. All right, I'd like to move on now. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Action item B, which is personnel. Could I have a motion? Did I have a second? I didn't hear. I have a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item C, approval of the pit musicians for the spring musical. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
I have a second. Comments, questions? Very excited to see the show. All in favor? Next, action item D, approval of memorandum of agreement between the North Shore CSD and the United Public Service Employee Union Custodial Unit. May I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Any comments?
I did have a question.
Yes.
Just curious about the years, Olivia. It seems that the snow pay issue seemed to be off by a year. There was no, the contract starts in 2016.
Yes,
but
nothing is there.
Nothing is there.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then it goes through June 30th of 2020. So it's all aligned properly for what? Okay, as long as it is, I'm going to go with that.
Okay, action item D.
Properly doesn't have to pay.
All in favor? Action item E, approval of memorandum of agreement between the North Shore CSD and the United Public Services Employees Union Part-Time Cleaners Unit. Could I have a motion? And a second? Second. And I have a second. Any comments? Questions? All in favor? Action item F, the approval of memorandum of agreement between the North Shore CSD and the United Public Services Employees Union Part-Time Drivers Unit. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? I have. Any questions? David, you have a question? Or you're just,
I'm free voting.
you're free voting? All in favor?
Early voting.
All in favor, Joanna? You're in. Not telling you which way to vote, just seeing if you're voting, Joanna, that's all. Action item G, oh my goodness, this is too loud. Approval of resolution for date of annual reorganization meeting. Could I have a motion? I have a motion, a second? And I have a second. Question, comment? All in favor? We discussed this at the last meeting. Thank you. Action item H. Can I take H, I, and J together? We're going to have acceptance of donations from the Coca-Cola Company, acceptance of donations from Nicole LaFontaine to the Fine and Performing Arts, acceptance of donation from Life Touch Photographies to the Athletic Department. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Second. Any comments? Joanna, please.
Question, okay.
We are voting Coca-Cola vending machine in order to receive $41 from.
No.
No.
It's in the
We have a
faculty
vending
lounge
machine
and they
in
give us
the
money.
faculty room. And there was, they collect money for it, there was some money left, so they donated it back to the district.
Okay, could the same question regarding the Life Touch photographers? You give us a donation in return.
Well, there are seniors, they do the photography of the students in the high school. Just 8, 9, 10. It's probably part of their contract with us that they give a portion back.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
the contract is really between the PTO and Life Touch. And it's done, and there are certain provisions in it that a certain number goes to the PTO who does the work, and a certain number, they do have certain provisions in it. I don't know if this is part of it. That was going to be my question. But I think the contract is not with the district. I think the contract is with the PTO.
Exactly.
If it's a contract provision, can it be a donation?
No, but it's not with us. The contract's not with us.
That was my point. It's not with us.
So the donation
No, you're
is
right,
to
you're
us
right.
based upon the contract they have with the PTO.
It sounds like then the donations from the
No, because there's a separate money that goes there.
It's still coming directly, which is.
It was, just so you know, I was on the PTO back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and we had Life Touch. We did do, and the PTO at the time, Liz Simone did it, looked at different photographers. They were limited in that they had to use a large photographer, and there's a limited number of those on Long Island because it ties into the ID cards. So you couldn't use a small vendor because of the volume and what needed to be done in the time frame that it needed to be done. So the PTO negotiated the contract with Life Touch, and there were provisions in there to begin with in terms of donations to certain organizations within the school. I don't recall this particular provision, but I do know that the cost were looked at by the PTO at least, I know twice, because it was done 7 years ago for a 3-year contract, and then it was done again. And I think it's just recently done again.
It was.
Okay, all right, thank you. All in favor? That was HIJ. Action item K, approval of budget transfer. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
And a question, comment? All in favor? Action item L, approval to dispose of inventory. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item M, approval of resolution to accept an increase in funding provided through OASIS. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor? Action item N, approval of change orders. There's 4 of them here. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
And comments or questions? All in favor? Action item O, approval of agreement with Shakira Doherty. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Comments, questions? All in favor? Action item P, the approval of a settlement agreement and release. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second? Questions? All in favor? Okay. We had a pretty long comments from the public, so if people are dying to get back up here, we're going to skip it. If anybody else wants to, no? Okay, good. Old business?
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Sarah, Dave?
Mine is very quick.
Okay.
I know we don't have enough time now, so I'm not asking for this to happen right now, but with the enrollment data, I just want to keep the burner simmering that we're going to look at historic trends of how students either tack on as we go or disappear as we go from the district. So I think all we need to know right now is that I'll see you in 2 weeks and I'll bring it up again.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much.
We'll be ready.
You ready? Okay.
I'm going to
Sarah?
be brief as well.
No, it's not possible.
Watch. I'm supposed to always provide the update on the
You are.
litigation, and the update is we're still waiting to hear.
Okay.
Our motion.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, new business? Joanna?
I just wanted to make the board aware that in conjunction with the school district, the council will be presenting a program on social host law on March 21st. That's going to happen at Glenwood Landing Elementary School.
Okay.
The presentation is going to be made by District Attorney Matthew Tsigas and a law enforcement officer. Social hosting is an issue in our community, and I really want to encourage parents to come and understand their risks and responsibilities regarding that.
Can we send a van around and force people to go?
That would be a great idea as far as I'm concerned.
Can we do that?
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? New business? All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.